Hello, everyone. Welcome to our today's webinar. My name is Oleg Barovic. I'll be your moderator tonight. I'm a PhD student at the University of Padua, Italy. And my today's guests are Professor Tanya Domi, professor at Columbia University of New York, and Professor Nemanja Batricevic from University of Montenegro. So tonight we are going to speak about a very important topic about nationalism, religion, and discrimination in Western Balkans. The question that is ever present in the last 3 decades in the Balkans, and by most the topics that are the most guilty for hate, war, destruction, and all bad things that are happening in Balkans politics. So tonight we will try to give some intro to you about the roots of this problem, about current situation, and what are potential solutions for this problem that is preventing Western Balkans from joining EU and modernizing and being democratic places and countries where human rights are guaranteed for all, and where the nationality, ethnicity, or religious background does not play important or the most important role in society. So I will start with Professor Batricevic, and I will ask him to give us some explanation about the connection between nationalism and religion in Western Balkans. What are the roots of this problem? How everything started? What are the goals of those extreme parts of Serbian Orthodox Church, and how Serbian Orthodox Church is using ethno-nationalism for its goals and for the goals of Serbian political elite, and how they manipulate with religious feelings of believers, and also how is that reflecting on those who are not members of Serbian Orthodox Church or Orthodox community, especially Montenegro and Bosnia. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to speak on these issues, and for taking interest in this region. I understand that, unfortunately, given the war in Ukraine and war in Israel, that Western Balkans is not in a primary focus of media and policymakers. However, I would argue that many of the issues we're going to discuss tonight that can be found in this triangle between nationalism, religion, and statehood lie in the heart of those conflicts as well. And this story, we can speak about Montenegro or Bosnia or Balkans, but in general, I think these topics and these conclusions can be easily extrapolated to other cases. And I think the references and the parallels can be made throughout this discussion. I'm a political scientist. I have a PhD in comparative politics, but I study ethnopolitics, so I'm more focused on how people use their identities and how they make political decisions based on their identities, how they think of themselves and how they interact with other groups. So I will speak about political and identity processes in Montenegro specifically, and more precisely about the process of desecularization of Montenegro society and the role of religion in competing nationalism in Montenegro. As far as I understood, Tanya is likely to focus more on Bosnia, and although the stories are very similar, although the nationalism plays a strong role there too, it's very different, two different cases, in a sense that in Bosnia, each nation has its own religion, so those two correspond, while in Montenegro, it's not like that. Identity is much more ambiguous, much more malleable, much more volatile than it is in Bosnia. So it's very different, an interesting case in that regard. If I need to compare it to something, I think it'll be the most comparable case to Ukraine and Russia. Montenegro, Serbia, Ukraine, and Russia. That will be probably the most likely corresponding case. So I'll just give a short overview of what is Montenegro case of, and what you should know in order to understand the current developments in Montenegro with those topics in mind. So Montenegro is extremely ethnically diverse polity. So it has at least 5 politically relevant nations. Each of those nations is internally split along religious lines. A very important issue is that fact is that Montenegro does not have one nationality that has absolute majority, meaning that in order to get access to power, to resources, you have to make a coalition with parties who are likely to be supported by the members of other national groups. Also, in this talk, I will focus on dynamic between Montenegrins and Serbs as a part of 2 nations, larger nations in Montenegro that are part of the Orthodox corpus. Another thing I think is theoretically very important to have in mind is that unlike modernization theories of nationalism that would suggest that development, modernization, state building would yield a single nation building agenda, single consolidated national identity. In Montenegro, trajectory went different ways, in a sense that second half of the 20th century, under socialist regime, in Montenegro, we got not 1, but 2 competing nation building agendas, 2 competing national narratives. One, broadly speaking, of course, understands Montenegrins as a separate nation, as a nation that has its own state and is similar to Serbs but is distinct. The other claiming that Montenegrins are not separate nation, but they are just a part of Serbian national tree. That if Montenegro has a state, it should be dissolved in the name of pan-Serbian unity. And the event that somehow took those 2 groups on a diverging path occurred in 1918, when the Montenegrin state, long story short, was dissolved by the pro-Serbian opposition. Montenegrin monarchy was exiled, Montenegrin territory was absorbed by the Serbia, and Montenegrin church was dissolved, and all the sacral and religious heritage was given to the Serbian Orthodox Church. So that's somehow the stage, the playing ground what we are talking about. So one additional thing I would point out that I think it's very often overlooked when we speak about Western Balkans. It has to do with structure and ideology of these institutions. So unlike Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodoxy does not have a centralized structure. And instead, churches become a national symbols of national being. They're actively part of national politics. So in Orthodoxy, in Eastern Orthodoxy, church jurisdiction corresponds to state boundaries. Each population is led by national religious leaders, and there is no such a thing as a pope, which commands same authority from the, for example, I don't know, Italians, Argentinian, Croats. So these local national patriarchs have a strong national boundaries, and the connection between religion and nationality and state is already very strong. Second thing we should have in mind is that given that most Western Balkans was under Ottoman Empire for centuries, church was the only institution that was preserving collective identity and memory before that. So church leaders were not only spiritual leaders, they're also military leaders, political leaders. So therefore, emergence of states in the 19th century in a part of Western Balkans, including Montenegro, was from the beginning very closely tied to the theocracy, to the religious elites. And uprising was not led by, like in Central Eastern Europe, for example, it was not led by a small group of highly educated intellectuals. It was led by rather illiterate masses. And the culture produced identity based on which nations will form later on. That identity and content was safeguarded by centuries by the church. And this, in today's terms, gives church very unique position and authority to speak on the issues of national identity. So when church, from this historical perspective, speaks about national identity, people tend to listen. People tend to take them, if not for granted, then with a large amount of respect and so to say, portfolio on the issue. So basically, the influence that church has on people in terms of telling them how to feel and what identity should be, from this perspective is somehow understandable. And from this perspective, we can also understand why, in, for example, civil war in 1990s, church authorities were so efficient in commanding people and spreading this war propaganda. That was in a very center of it. So why is this important? Like this story I told you about today's Montenegro. It is important because this entanglement between national labels and religious labels persist. So basically, when Serbian elites realized that a religion is somehow a gateway for shifting national boundaries, they decided to instrumentalize this layer of identity, since Montenegrins and Serbs have a common denominator in Eastern Orthodoxy. This was a very good platform for shifting people from one category to another. And we will see this play out in decade after decade. Even today, in the last elections, you will see this a very simple argument. Everyone who is Orthodox must be a Serb. Meaning those two have the same meaning, have the same content. And this is what actually decides which person will be closer to those competing national narratives. So this brings me to contemporary politics in Montenegro. And I would say the following: these two narratives came head to head, were conflicting directly in elections 2020, when the political coalition led by the Serbian Orthodox Church overpowered pro-Montenegrin political stances who were in power for almost 30 years. So immediately became clear that in order to fulfill this national agenda, the opposing national agenda from the previous government, they will have to push also towards the process of desecularization. And this process was evident from the very election night. It might be strange to many of you who come from the Western countries that, for example, future prime minister celebrated his victory in elections, not in his party offices, not in a state building, but in monastery with the head of the Serbian Orthodox Church. In months following that victory, because the coalition was very heterogeneous, the crucial meeting in which government was formed happened also in monastery. And this meeting of political leaders was presided by a head of the Serbian church in Montenegro. His authority was the authority that managed to somehow smooth over these differences in ideological terms. And just to be more clear, this government was referred to as apostolic government because there was 12 ministers. And the prime minister called those ministers apostles. He made reference to the biblical and to religious. So this is somehow the environment we live today. One of the things that follow that, and where you see this engineering of national identity based on religion, is that church pushed strongly for introduction of religious education in schools. This was, of course, unlawful under current Montenegrin constitution, but former minister, also staunch supporter of the Serbian Orthodox Church of Education, she actually opted out for a second best option for them, which means that they gave public money for private religious school. So basically, for the first time in Montenegrin history, you will have a religious education in Montenegro. To give you some data to have a point of reference, if you on surveys, in 2018, only 11% of people, when asked how religious they are, responded highly religious in terms of from 0 to 10. They said 10. in 2021, that number jumped to 27% already. So it's a strong increase in few years. This was very evidently a result and manifestation of strength that Serbian Church has in on the field in political sphere. We have census this year. After 13 years, population census happened in Montenegro. In many countries, this is purely statistical, administrative issue. Here, the most important questions are not how many of people live here, what are the conditions of living, and such things. No, the most important thing was the nationality and religion. And the Serbian Church took a population census more importantly than the election. They even openly said that census in Montenegro, neighboring country, was the most important issue of the Serbian government in this year. Serbian patriarch of the Serbian Church came to Montenegro 5 years prior to the beginning of the census to have a speech and to call all Orthodox people in Montenegro to say that they are Serbs, not Montenegrins. They on the field also priests have a very strong campaign suggesting people that they're going to be punishment in some, of course, punishment not in a literal sense, but exodus from church if they decide freely what they feel as nationality. And they made a reference that what's going on in Montenegro prior to their victory was actually Ukrainization of Montenegro. It was a somehow fake identity made by the political elites to get us away from our roots. If you want to speak about what church does to manipulate those boundaries and to merge religious and national identity, I think there is no more clear-cut example than what they do with the Baptist certificates. For instance, if you get baptized in Montenegro, they used to write in a certificate both religion and nationality. So because the Serbian Church controls all the temples in Montenegro and monasteries, if you as a Montenegrin decide to get baptized, they're gonna write you as an Orthodox Serb. So if you want to express your religious part of your identity, you have to sacrifice your national identity, because they will never write that you are Orthodox Montenegrin. Later on, they decided not to put this in the certificates, but they write that in their own church books. So basically, it's constant reminder that you are not allowed to pick your nationality or to feel nationally as you wish if you want to be Orthodox in practice. If you want to practice Orthodox religion in Montenegro, Serbian Church would somehow try to force you into a national category. So to me, that means that religion is, in this case at least, it's much more an instrument and much less something that a freedom that in many other countries means something very good. Here, it is a tool that very, very easily can move into conflict, can move into negation, can move into discrimination, and basically the freedom for one group means less freedom for the other group. And that's the main issue, I think, at least in Montenegro, when it comes to this interplay between religion and nationality. So that will be my at least opening statement. I don't want to take too much time before Tanya, and also Alec maybe forgot to tell you, but if you want to ask questions, we are open for Q&A, and then we can maybe discuss some details furthermore if you wish. So.
Thank you. Before I move, my question to Tanya, I just wanted to ask you, to briefly say a minute or two about discrimination against the believers of Montenegrin Orthodox Church. I think that's very, very important topic, because in the media, especially in the Western media, we cannot read that much, but that's a very, very huge problem, because believers of Montenegrin Orthodox Church are taken off from almost all human rights in Montenegro, especially the priests and also the believers. So can you just shortly inform our participants about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wasn't maybe I didn't maybe underline it properly, but listen, there is no worse negation of someone's rights than not allowing him to express his identity or his religious beliefs. So if you're Montenegrin in Montenegro, you're not allowed to practice religious services in monasteries that your ancestors built unless you're willing to sacrifice your national identity. So, for instance, if you want to get baptized, if you want to get married in church, if you want to get buried in a cemetery around the church, you have to you cannot do it as a Montenegrin with a Montenegrin priest. You have to submit yourselves to national assimilation and to becoming something else in national terms. And that's a very traumatic experience for many people, for many generations. And on a very personal note, this is how it looks like. So my family is from Cetinje. Cetinje Monastery is a stronghold of Montenegrin identity. My house, in which my family still lives, is 200 meters from the monastery. My father nor I ever entered in monastery. It is a pinnacle of our history, of our ancestors. They built it, they defended it, but last three generations did not enter that monastery. Because we know if we enter, if we want to do anything to express our religious beliefs, if we have them, if you want to get married or baptized, you had to sacrifice your national identity. And that's discrimination of a large group of people. Montenegrin Orthodox Church is the third largest religious group in Montenegro, without any religious rights. I mean, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think this is the gist of it.
Thank you. I mean, I'd just like to inform our participants, we leave like some 10-15 minutes at the end, like for questions and answers. If anyone needs like to ask something or more details about the topics that we are discussing, you are free to ask. And I think that my guests will do their best to respond to your questions. Tanya, like I do not know a foreigner with more experience, both like in academic and practical way with Western Balkans than you. You have huge experience, like even from the start of the 90s, and you have your personal experience from the first person, like what happened, how it was like 3 decades ago, and how it's today. And you are like constantly monitoring the development of both Montenegro and Bosnia, but more Bosnia in the last like 2 decades. So, can you please share with us from your perspective how things change? Are we now in better position or in worse position than before, especially in the case of Bosnia, because Bosnia it was always the most diverse country in the question of ethnicity and religion, and that's unfortunately why it was always under the effect of this nationalist politics, which unfortunately culminated with genocide against Bosniak Muslim community back in the 90s. So can you please share with us like what is the current situation in Bosnia regarding this ethno-nationalistic and religious subject, but also what's the role of US administration and the role of US policy, and what can be done to save the Bosnia and also Montenegro from the problems that they are currently. Tanya, just unmute.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today in this topic, which is, I think, quite fundamental to the Balkans in general. Yeah, I started working on and became engaged in Bosnia as a congressional aide in 1991 when I was working on Capitol Hill for Congressman Frank McCloskey when the war broke out and began initially in Slovenia, but then more prominently in Croatia, and then in '92 in Bosnia. So I think what's so interesting about Bosnia is, as you alluded to, the most diverse country. I had a 22% intermarriage rate between ethnicities. The three main ethnic groups and their requisite religious identity would be the Bosniaks that are Muslim, the Croats, which are generally Roman Catholics, and the Serbs, who are Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox. Of course, that was the basic makeup of Bosnia's population. There was also a joke in Bosnia that was alluded to during Tito's tenure when he led SFRY, was that Tito always knew who to arrest. So Tito arrested most of the nationalists because he identified that as a threat to Yugoslavia. I think he was pretty spot on with regard to his understanding of how much nationalism would be a threat to Yugoslavia. That was self-evident. The branding of Yugoslavia, brotherhood and unity, was probably one of the strongest brands in the 20th century. You know, we didn't talk about branding even 25, 30 years ago, but it's very clear that the branding of Yugoslavia, brotherhood and unity, was indeed a very strong brand, and many people believed it until the war actually happened in Bosnia. And like one of the books I cited in my master's thesis was The Sociopath Next Door. And you have heard all these stories of people, Bosniaks living next door to Serbs, and Serbs living next door to Muslims, and Muslims in solidarity with Jews even, was that people lived together, they married each other, they shared weekends together, they ate together, they celebrated religious holidays together, which was very prominent in Bosnian culture. And people would celebrate Bayram. They would go to break fast dinners, and Jews would celebrate Hanukkah, and people would come to their houses. And so for many people that believed in the brand of brotherhood and unity, they were shocked. They were shocked when the war began in March of 1992, after Bosnia voted for independence in a referendum. And on that day, immediately thereafter, and ensuing immediately, was that barricades went up on the streets of Sarajevo and around the country, and there was a defection from J&A barracks in Serb-dominated areas, and of course the rise of militia that was used by Milosevic. But I would say that the brutality and the viciousness of the war, 110,000 dead, 2.5 million refugees that went to more than 80 countries around the world, is indicative of just how much the hatred what erupted. And it erupted and manifested through ethnic identity and religious affiliation. And I would also add that the media played a major, major role in prosecuting a war in Bosnia. And media was controlled ethnically and politically. And those media outlets advanced distinct ethnic religious ideology that was used as a justification to kill others. And it culminated in July 1995 in the Srebrenica genocide, in the murder of more than 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men and boys, and the deportation of their families that was facilitated by Ratko Mladic, the Serb general, who came to Srebrenica saying, "I will harm no one, we're here to be your friend," ultimately committing the greatest crime against the greatest number of people killed since the conclusion of World War II in Bosnia. So it was a destruction of the entire society. I would say that when the US intervened, and it was a late intervention after Srebrenica, that was probably the apex of US power in the region, Pax Americana. It was at that time, President Bill Clinton was the president, using NATO as a way to intervene in Eastern Bosnia, and then later establishing I4 under Supreme Allied Commander of Europe in Bosnia, followed by S4 and now U4, which is lightly armed and about 1,800 soldiers. So we've gone from over 30 years ago of the breakup of Yugoslavia that fell apart as the wars began in Croatia, in Bosnia, and then later in Kosovo, between Kosovo and Serbia, to now what's characterized as the Balkans, but more to the point, Western Balkans, those countries that haven't joined the EU yet, although as we all know, Montenegro and North Macedonia are NATO members. So, and Croatia was the first country after Slovenia to join the EU, and Croatia joined in 2013. So Slovenia and Croatia are EU members, but there are now 6 Western Balkan countries that have not entered the EU. Ethnicity and religious identity is not only foundational to Bosnia, but because of the Dayton Peace Accords and the Constitution that was written by an American State Department officer, basically politically organized the country around ethnicity. And it's an interesting discussion when I heard Professor Batrachevich talk about national identity, that national identity is forsaken for religious identity in Montenegro. What happens in Bosnia is that you can't declare that you're a Yugoslav under the Constitution. You can't declare that you are other. You have to say Bosniak, Serb, or Croat. And if you're other, if you're Roma or Jewish, you even can't run for president of the country. They were left out of the electoral law and the Constitution from protection by the US government. So is it better? No, it's not better. As a matter of fact, Milorad Dodik, the president of the Republika Srpska, which was designed in Dayton as a political entity belonging to Serbs, and then the federation entity, political entity, it's Croats and Bosniaks, they are separated politically by ethnicity. And I worked on the implementation of the Dayton Peace Accords, and by my second year working on it through the OSCE mission in Sarajevo, I began to understand very quickly that this was not going to be sustainable. It was a document designed to stop the carnage, the killing of people, but it was not a document really written to infuse and establish a vibrant democracy in Bosnia. And this is truly regretful. Now, even Richard Holbrooke, who negotiated the Dayton Peace Accords, said that this wasn't a document set in stone and that it would need to be amended. But as we know, elections matter. And even in the United States, after the peace was established in Dayton, Ohio in 1995, and then signed in Paris that year, it did stop the carnage. But what it put in place is a really monstrosity of a document and multiple layers of government designed to decentralize governance and actually impair national control. So what happens is that, and what has occurred over the years is that the ethnic groups within the government block each other, effectively block each other, and stop the process of governance. And now what has emerged most consistently, probably in the last 10 years, is that Dodik, the president of the RS, continues to call for secession from Bosnia, the country. He's attempting to secede from the Constitutional Court, and he's being prosecuted right now for that. And we have a situation where it's an existential threat to the country. And I would add, and I think moreover in the region, that Serbia casts a long shadow over the region. We can see what happened in Montenegro in 2016, a coup attempt on election day, but also the instrumentalization of the Serbian Orthodox Church into Montenegrin politics. But moreover, it's used as a way to appear to be religious, although a lot of these politicians aren't religious really in practice, but they use it politically to obtain political objectives that are mostly undemocratic and exclude people. And I would point out that this also extends as far as Moscow to Belgrade, because the Russian Orthodox Church rubs close shoulders with the Serbian Orthodox Church, as an example. And the Roman Catholic Church has played a role in Croatia. In 2013, in its first referendum, the Roman Catholic Church was involved in a referendum that pushed and was successful to constitutionally ban same-sex marriage, although the progressive government followed immediately to adopt a civil union law for domestic partnerships. But what's interesting is all those values that follow that church or upheld by that church get imposed, and not everybody is religious, nor does everybody practice a religion, because many people who lived in Yugoslavia were communists and did not practice religion at all. So those people who identify as Yugoslavs have no place in Bosnian society, for example. So I would just say that the situation now, almost we're 2 years away from the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Accords, while there has been no active armed engagement in Bosnia. I would call it war, rhetorical war by other means, and that's obstructing governance and impairing human rights and doing everything possible to keep Bosnia on the margins of the global community. And moreover, Russia and Serbia work closely together to block Bosnia in different ways, as they also do with Kosovo. And so I would say the situation is pretty dire. And I would add, as a critic of US foreign policy, that US foreign policy has engaged in mollifying some of the worst nationalists and supporting them. In the case of Vučić, the president of Serbia, on saying, oh, well, we can work with him. He is our friend. And Serbia is the biggest country in the Western Balkans, so they're the most important. But actually, they probably threaten more countries than they support. And so I would say, actually, Serbia poses a threat to the entire region. Also, what you have in Zagreb is another kind of right-wing government, the rise of autocracy, not only in the Balkans, but throughout Europe and around the world. That what you see in Zagreb is an effort to use a so-called EU platform alleged to embrace human rights and democracy, but advancing nationalist aims. And just next door in Hungary is a prime example with Mr. Orban, who has in effect become a one-party state under the EU. So I would say the situation is not good from a governance standpoint. From if you're going to take the temperature of democracy, it's not very good at all throughout the region. I would say that actually from an EU enlargement standpoint, Montenegro's done a very good job on checking the boxes, but how it gets implemented is a different scenario. And secondly, Kosovo has been hindered left and right by Serbia's efforts to marginalize it as well. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you so much for this
Alex, your voice is breaking up.
situation. But both probably it's because of my connection. So thank you. Now I will leave you for questions, answers.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Guess we lost Alex.
Yeah, I think he's reconnecting or something like that.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah,
I can
now
hear you now.
Okay. I don't know why it's your name on me, but
Oh,
I will
that's
now
terrible.
I will now leave for questions and answers. If there are any, please write your question. If you have any for our speakers, we'll wait for a minute if there are any questions. it doesn't seem that there are any questions coming up.
Well, Alec, why don't you ask us some questions?
Well, of course, like if we have time, I know that we are a little bit short, but yes, I mean, like, Tanya, what do you see like as a possible? Oh, sorry, we have like one question. I would
Okay.
give it a priority on the mind. So, Joanne is asking, when you referred to the Montenegrin Orthodox Church, were you talking about the Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro, or is it a separate, it is a separate entity?
So yeah, it's a separate entity. So Montenegrin Orthodox Church was a separate church, Autocephalous Church. It has it was a church that was designed to serve purposes of religious practices for Orthodox population in Montenegro until 1918. With dissolution of Montenegrin state and absorption into Serbian state, Serbian Orthodox Church took over. So currently in Montenegro, there are two Orthodox churches. One is Serbian Orthodox Church and the other is Montenegrin Orthodox Church. Serbian Orthodox Church is a church of Serbian state, but given the monopoly they had since the dissolution of Montenegrin state, they control all the temples, churches, monasteries. So basically, no, there are two separate entities, and we refer to Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro to make distinction from the Serbian Orthodox Church in, for example, Serbia or Bosnia. So there are two separate entities. With also difference that one, Montenegrin Orthodox Church does not have any rights. It does not have any ability to use those churches. Their believers are basically completely discriminated against since the Montenegro independence was renewed, and that's the biggest issue. And just to make it even more clear, so church is the only national identity issue that remained unresolved since independence was renewed. New constitution has Montenegrin language as official language. Montenegro state exists as independent state with its own flag and anthem. The only area in which Serbian church still or Serbian state still has a control over is religion, and that's only in case when it was only a similar case in Macedonia earlier, not today that much, but that's the case between those entities. I hope I was clear.
Thank you, Nemanja. While we are waiting for maybe some other questions, I wanted to ask Tanya, like as someone who is following US policy and everything that is happening today in the States, are you afraid for like the way how US is behaving towards the Balkans after the US presidential elections if Donald Trump wins again? Because we know that like the most of those problems that we have because now started while he was the president of the US. So can we be afraid that if he wins again, that we are going to have like
well,
this,
actually,
like,
I'm not afraid. I'm deeply disappointed with Joe Biden's policy. Let's not even talk about Trump. You know, I think Joe Biden has been a great.
Sorry. If I can interrupt you, I'll just need to add that U.S. ambassador to Montenegro, appointed by Donald Trump, who was
Richard Grinnell,
openly supporting Serbian Orthodox Church, who said that if Djukanovic loses, he will pull tanks out of the streets. She is still ambassador to Montenegro. So Biden administration did not change her. They left like the roots of
Well,
Donald Trump.
the reason why they didn't change probably is because the Republicans had a block on ambassadors in the Senate for like months and months and months. And they clearly, I bet you inside the State Department, they didn't prioritize a change on that ambassadorship. But don't let me get down in the weeds on this. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, I get it. I will just say to you that well, Richard Grinnell's an example of somebody who cashed in from the Trump administration, who would probably love to return so that he could have more dinners with Vucic. But let me just say this. I think that I'm very disappointed in Biden policy. Biden has got his hands full. I think the Biden extraction out of Afghanistan should have been a warning to everybody that is a friend of America. Firstly, secondly, when I saw the first letter from Tony Blinken to the Bosnian government in March of 21, it was like, oh, we want to work with you on corruption and we want to work with you on media freedom or something like that. I mean, we were talking about a portfolio and an agenda that was so weak. I was like, this is a joke. This is not serious. This is not a serious approach to the region. And we thought it would be an opportunity to reset US foreign policy under Joe Biden, who was a big, big participant and advocate during the Balkan Wars of, ending the wars and supporting democracy in the Balkans. This is a guy that probably had more experience than any other senator at that time when the wars began. So I will just say this, talk about disappointment. It's more than that. It is, I think, a highly cynical policy, a cynical approach. Chris Hill is calling Vucic our friend. And I think what they've done is it's transactional. Maybe he's calling Vucic his friend because Vucic is selling arms to Ukraine at US request. But still, that shouldn't be your whole foreign policy. So I'm quite critical of the approach to Bosnia that's on, it's on life support. If the wind blows strongly on the Kosovo border, God only knows what's going to happen. So do I think that Joe Biden, if Serbia crossed the border into Kosovo, would Joe Biden say it's time to activate Article 5 of NATO? Not sure I would believe it. I'm not confident of that. So I would say this is the time of weak powers and a multipolar world. It is not what America was in 95, Pax Americana, that negotiated the Dayton Peace Accords. Now we're talking about Russia, China, Turkey, and the US, and the UK is out of the EU. And I will say this, since the UK left the EU, they've been more engaged on the Balkans, and I think in a positive way. But still, I'm very disappointed with the Western approach to the region, with the Russian ambassador in Sarajevo threatening Bosnia's aspirations to NATO and said, our response, look at Ukraine. He literally said that. How brazen can you be? Earlier in January, there was a F-16 flyover Bosnia after, more threats from the Russian and the secessionist actions by the Russian proxy, Milorad Dodik. So the sanctions that the US has applied to Dodik hasn't changed his behavior at all. So I say back to the drawing board and let's reconceptualize US foreign policy that adheres to its values and its beliefs. Allegedly, what they speak to Ukraine is one thing, they try to follow it. up in implementation, but so far in the Balkans, they don't walk their talk. That's my view.
I mean, I think that in the States, people very underestimate the role of Russia and its influence in Serbia and Serbian Orthodox Church. I mean, back in 2020, Serbian Orthodox Church dignitaries were traveling to the States, and they were using Russian money to lobby in the United States, saying that pro-communists in Montenegro want to destroy Christianity and Christian church.
And I'm
So,
sure the Republicans on the Hill loved it. I mean, they were eating it up. I mean, if the Republican Party goes to CPAC, you know, in Budapest, that tells you everything you need to know. I don't disagree with you at all. I don't disagree with you at all. And I mean, when you're in Belgrade, you can turn on any street corner and you can buy a Putin t-shirt. You know, you've got Russia Today, you've got Sputnik News, and Russia's contributing small amounts of money to over 100 NGOs in Serbia. I completely agree with you. And I think the US is turning away from confronting, and they're forsaking US leadership and power. That's it. Full stop. And I cannot explain it. I just think they don't want to engage. They want to manage. They don't want to initiate. They manage. They don't initiate. They respond when they have to, in Ukraine as an example. And we'll see how long that lasts. So I'm very pessimistic, and sorry to be so pessimistic, but I'm looking at behavior and ignoring the words, the rhetoric.
I mean, when you said at the beginning that you're disappointed, I just remember the streets of Sarajevo when Joe Biden was elected.
I know.
People were celebrating because they thought that the new administration is going like to end 5 years of like basically hell while the Donald Trump was president, but unfortunately nothing changed.
I totally agree with you. And here's a warning to the White House. Those Bosnian Americans in Utica, in Astoria, New York, in St. Louis, in Atlanta, in Jacksonville, Florida, in Des Moines and Waterloo, are they going to turn out and vote for Joe Biden? I don't think so. And also, this also goes to some of the Albanians too. I've heard concerns by the Albanians as well with respect to Kosovo, the lack of support. You know, people feel like the Biden administration should have done more because they appealed to the Bosnian American vote, to the Albanian American vote. And here's a warning shot to the White House, and I don't know if they can recover.
And unfortunately, we're not mentioning Kosovo that much, and like we are running out of time, maybe some 2 more minutes. But like probably the most who needs support today is Kosovo, but they are like not receiving it. I think that
I think the Kosovo government is a very solid government. I think Osmani and Kurti are a good combination. I think it's a young government. I've worked with her office. The young people that work in that government, advanced degrees, it's very dynamic. You don't see that in Sarajevo. You don't see that in Belgrade. You got to have political access through, you know, your father, your uncle, or whatever. I have to say that it's very inspiring. And I engage with a lot of Albanians in New York, big population in my congressional district, because Elliot Engel once was the congressman of my district, where a lot of Albanians live, and I happen to be third generation. But nonetheless, I think the Kurti Osmani government is the most dynamic and the most leaning forward government in Southeastern Europe. And they're inspiring to me as somebody who's worked on the Balkans as a Balkan analyst for over 30 years. I see a lot of hope in that government and the things they're doing and saying. and
Can
how
I
they're behaving.
can I just add something about Kosovo? I think Kosovo is a great case to show how American diplomacy failed in the Balkans, because they always speak in Bosnia, Montenegro, Serbia, corruption is the big issue, not the nationality, not nationalism, not the religion,
Right.
fundamentalism. But then they fail to support the only regime in the Western Balkans and the only leader in Kurti which is not corrupt.
I completely agree with you,
That's so
Nemanja.
because they always speak about corruption and then they decide to cut legs under the only non-corrupted leader and support all of those crooked Balkan leaders.
I
It's
com-
so it's
I
such
agree with you 100%.
that
It's
Kosovo is such a good example to show and just to remind those who like if you don't know, in Kosovo there is a monument to Bill Clinton.
That's
Tony
right.
Blair. So it's
That's
such
right.
a strong connection with the UK and US in gratitude
Yes. Yes.
for the 90s. And I don't remember, I mean, I'm young, but I remember those events happening. There's never been such an anti-American, anti-European stance in Montenegro, Kosovo, and Bosnia, because those are the young, liberal, civic democracies who are
Yes.
not fighting
America,
support.
yes.
Yeah,
America has lost the base the citizen in the street in Kosovo and in Bosnia for sure. They've lost it. They never had it in Serbia for obvious reasons, but you know, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go. Boy, this part of the discussion, we could go on for a while here. I really want to thank you, Alec, and it's really wonderful to hear your ideas and your thoughts, Nemanja. I appreciated it very much.
thank you, Liza. I
Thank you
enjoyed it.
so much, Tanya and Nemanja. Thank you so much
See,
both. I think that our
yeah.
participants had a wonderful time, and I mean, like, I would just like now ask Hunter to end this webinar. I think that we had a great time. Last hour, I think this is going to be on YouTube, so everyone who wasn't like able to listen to us would have a chance to do that later. And once more, like, thank you so much, and see you on some other occasion.
See you soon, Alec. See you soon, Alec.
Well, yeah, and see you soon, of course.
Bye-bye.
And hope we have